Hi everyone, I'm Hayley. I'm always in the craft room, and today we're getting a bit cheeky. I'm going to tell you about 6 of my sewing opinions that everyone else in the crafting world seems to disagree with. We're going to ease in with a not very controversial one. Pockets. I don't get it. So many bloggers see a pattern and are like, yay, pockets. Oh my God, pockets, need to add pockets. What are you all carrying around that you need to put in said pockets? I have a couple of ready-to-wear dresses with pockets. I used to make every pattern exactly as per the instructions and put pockets in. When I bought an overlocker, one of the first things I did was chop most of said pockets off because I don't use them. And I want them to go forwards. They usually go backwards, so they're flapping around. I'm constantly rearranging them. You can often see in them. We all know I never buy enough fabric, so quite often I have to do the pocket out of a different fabric, and then if you can see in them, it looks terrible. But worst of all, I forget I have them, I never use them, except for about once a month when I think, oh, that's a great place to put a tissue. Do I remember that when I come to wash said garment? No. No, I don't. And then I spend the next month picking little bits of disintegrated tissue off every item of clothing I own. Sorry if you love them, but pockets, it is no for me. The second thing that everyone's raving about at the moment, which I just don't get, is the sewing bee. Now, yeah, it's nice to have a sewing-y thing on telly, but I just feel like it's not made by sewers, which makes sense. It's made by people who make television, but they don't seem to know an awful lot about sewing. So there's a few things that get to me, and the first thing is how they call knit fabric stretch. Not stretch fabric, stretch. So they're like, oh, it's tricky working with stretch. And I'm like, stretch fabric. Also, it's not that tricky. Why do they make such a big deal out of it? And some of the stuff they do is really tricky, like the refashion challenge. That just seems impossible. And they're just like, oh, whatever. Take a backpack, make it into a coat, no big deal. Strange. I also don't like how 80% of it is everyone's backstory. I get the human interest angle and everybody loves it, but I'm here for the sewing. Show me that actual sewing. I feel the same way about the current iteration of MasterChef. If you watch British TV, you might get this. But it's all about the backstory and also ridiculous time pressures, so they're all really, really stressed and dun dun dun, counting down. I'm old enough to remember the original MasterChef with Lloyd Grossman. Anyone else remember that? And it was such a calm, relaxing programme, actually about cookery. And there were 3 contestants and they showed you exactly what they were making. They made a lovely, like, 3-course meal or something. And they talked you through it to the point that you could recreate it yourself at home. Loved it. Telly nowadays, all about the drama, and it's not about the actual thing it's purportedly about. Anyway, maybe it's changed. Let me know in the comments. I haven't actually watched it at all, this series. Just not interested. The next thing I just can't get on with is pins. Or more specifically, pins don't get on with me. I wish I was one of those people who says, oh, I don't need pins to sew. I can just sew without pins. Ah, the dream. But no, I'm one of those people who needs loads of pins, loads, especially around like an arm side. But pins just catch me all the time. Right, if I put them in north, south, upper seam, as it goes, like as the fabric goes up and over the machine, when it's tilted like that and the pin sticks straight up, they catch me every time. They cut me. I bleed. Nobody wants blood on a project. But if I put them in sideways, like across the seam, then as I reach over there to change like the stitch width or something, they catch me sideways. I absolutely hate them, but they are quite necessary. I quite often use clips, you know, the Clover Wonder clips, but they are really heavy. So sometimes they distort things. Anyone have any tips about pins? because, yeah, every single sewing project, they cut me. Is it just me? I know Valerie from What Valerie Makes mentioned this, and I am totally on board, but I rarely hear it spoken about. So, opinions on pins, please. Number 4 is the 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. It's just too much. It's too big. Especially if it's a curve and a curve. It's so difficult to get them together. Ugh. I understand the argument for it is that it's like fitting insurance, but the companies that most often seem to use a 5/8 seam allowance is the big 4, and who needs fit insurance in those? They're massive. Every one I've ever made, according to my size on the envelope back, has come out like 2 sizes too big. The last thing I need is the ability to add another, like 10 centimetres around? No, it's so wasteful of fabric. Like, seriously, you can get so many more pattern pieces on a width of fabric with a smaller seam allowance. Whilst we're on it, I'm not keen on a 6mm seam allowance because there is no fit insurance in that. And also, I get that it's usually for knit projects where you just put it straight through the overlocker, but I find it really hard to get it exactly along the edge of the fabric. Whereas if it's a 1cm seam allowance, my preference, you chop a bit off and then it wraps really neatly. When I'm trying to get it right along the edge, but also trying not to get any off, quite often I leave just a tiny bit of a gap and then the looper threads look messy. We don't like that, do we? So yeah, I'm a 1cm seam allowance girl, please. Saves fabric, easier to ease curves, still a bit of wiggle room if you need it. Or how about patterns are just sized correctly? I mean, that would be easier, wouldn't it? And this kind of brings me on to my last thing, which is so popular in the sewing, vlogging, blogging sphere that I'm kind of nervous to say it. And like, no shade if you love this. And if you are one of the incredible ladies who invented this concept, hats off to you. It's genius. Labels. I love all the little sayings you get on the cool labels. I think they're hilarious, brilliant, but I don't want them in my clothes. So itchy. Again, I think this is a like me problem because I'm a bit of a wimp. But no, literally, one of the most important reasons I sew my own clothes is not only so there are no labels in it, but so there isn't even a stump where I've cut the label out. Labels annoy me so much, but quite often if I cut them out, then what's left gets to me. So I sometimes have to like unpick that actual seam, ease it out, and then re-sew it down. There's no way I'm putting myself through that in handmade clothes. Now I know a lot of clever people put them on the outside, which does look cool, but I have a problem with that as well. Because I once got into an argument with a lady who said, "Oh, I like your top." And I said, "Oh, thank you so much. I made it." And she said, "No, you didn't." And I was like, "Yeah, I did." And she was like, "I know you didn't." And I was like, "Seriously? Like, I know I did." She was like, "You can't kid me. There's a label sticking out the seam." And I was like, "Oh, yeah, I put that in." And she was just like, "Okay, see you, bye." What was that all about? So strange. Anyway, it shouldn't put me off putting labels on the outside of my clothes, but it's just one extra step I don't need. So, no. But yeah, all of these things are things I just don't get. I could probably think of more. Let me know your things in the comments below. Is there something in the sewing community that everyone else seems to love that you just can't get your head around? Let me know. Anyway, I hope to be back soon with more actual sewing. Take care. Bye-bye. I'm Hayley. I'm not centered. Hang on. Is that better? Nope.